Jai Gurudev, welcome to this satsang. So lately I have had some interesting conversations about the Atma, about consciousness, about the heart. And I would like to bring this in today because I think it's very interesting to talk about, because we not often realize who we really are. We are identified with what we see here in the physical world. We identify ourselves with the body. We identify ourselves with the ego, the mind, the emotions, the stories, the titles, and so on, right? So I want to bring this into a little more detailed perspective so we can have a clearer understanding of what is what, because it's very easy to become confused, and in this yogmaya, this illusion that is going on, we have no clue actually. And I hope this can bring a little more clearer understanding and view of who you are and who you are not. So if we start from the foundation, and the foundation is of course the creation, God, the supreme reality, the supreme soul itself, right? And this gives an expression and outcomes the soul, the Atma. And the Atma has a specific personality. And this Atma is what makes you function. It's what makes the body exist. It what makes the mind exist. Because the Atma is inside of the physical body. The thing here is that when we get born and we come into the physical world, we forget about the past lives, we forget about our true nature, and we get covered by the mind. So it's like the Atma itself is covered by the mind. So we start to understand the reality out of a limited perspective. So if we go a step forward from the Atma, we can experience the observer, right? You can observe that you think, you can observe that you feel, you can observe that you are now watching me talking to you or listening to me when I'm talking to you, right? And this observer is consciousness. This is consciousness itself. And the heart that we are having, we are talking in the spiritual terms, we are talking about heart, we are talking about love, we are talking about unconditional love. But have we really experienced unconditional love? Because the love we are experiencing in the physical form is often based on fear. It's a limited way of love. And the heart itself has also a spiritual energy. But what we experience is that we are totally in our ego. We are so much in the ego, and we are so we are so connected to our experiences. We have had traumas, we have had different type of experiences that led us to a certain kind of behavior, a certain kind of identity that we are so stuck on. And when the mind is active, there is a lot of thoughts, and there's a lot of thoughts, and there's a lot of activity in the mind during the day, right? So when there is a lot of activity in the mind, that it means there is a lot of thoughts. And when there is a lot of thoughts, it's not so easy for us to go in and become one with the observer, right? With consciousness. So we stay in the mind and we stay in the ego, and we just operate from this state, right? And this automatically becomes our reality, and this is what we believe is us, We are referring to me, we are referring to I, and this always goes into the ego. It doesn't go into the Atma itself, right? So the Atma is still covered by Maya, is still covered by mind, this illusion. So what we do is we start to do sadhana, and sadhana is spiritual practice, and we do the spiritual practice, layer by layer gets processed, right? So we process things that are in our subconscious mind. And when we process those thoughts, emotions, experiences, we get a little bit more space, a little bit more space. And when we can tap into that space, we can tap into the observer, right? And what is happening is, as long as the Maya is so strong, right, the observer gets melted into the mind and into the ego, so we don't see it. We don't experience. I have many times I have asked people, can you observe, can you become as the observer? And no, what is the observer? There's not even an experience of being able to experience the observer, right? Because there is so much going on in the mind. There is so many emotions, there is so many thoughts. That it's so hard for us to really grasp into a more subtle field, so to say. So what we do is, by doing spiritual practice, we get more and more absorbed into the observer, right? So we start to observe and we start to analyze from that state, from the conscious state, right? We become more aware. Because as we act from the ego and we act from the mind, we are very limited, right? And as we are in the mind and we are in the ego, we cannot see that we are limited. We just stay there and we cannot see, past it. But as we start to process and grow spiritually, we can move into this observation mode, so to say. And we can start to observe, okay, now this is certain behavior and this is connected to my ego. Now there is thoughts. Okay, those thoughts are this or that, right? And then automatically, the more we absorb ourselves into this consciousness, Atma are pulling this consciousness to itself. So it's like we are trying to, the Atma wants you to experience the Atma. Because the Atma is who you are. You are not the body, you are not the mind, you are not the ego. Okay? So when the consciousness is drawing itself into the Atma, you can start to experience who you are. And when we totally absorb ourselves into the Atma, this is called self-realization. It's not the end goal. The end goal is God realization, to merge the Atma into the Supreme Atma, the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Reality, God. So there are a few layers to it, and if we can see, we see consciousness, the observer, we can see the mind, we can see the ego, we can see the emotions, then we can understand a little bit more about who we are, what we are operating from, right? We can see that we are operating now. This is an ego action. This is just the ego. This is just the mind. And we can start to see. Because often in life we think that we have had an extraordinary experience, right? Sometimes we think like, wow, I must have experienced God. I must have experienced this or that, right? But it can only be one level of the mind, actually. Okay? So we have to be honest and we have to start to work towards the goal. And towards the goal is to understand who you are. And pass through many incarnations to reach this level of a human being. Okay? So you have the opportunity this time to really understand who you are. And by understanding who you are, you will not longer be in the illusion, and then you can start to master yourself. Because desires always goes after the mind, like this, yeah? If we cannot control the desires, if we cannot control the mind, we will always be stuck in the world. The senses will always go out, and it will be very hard for the senses to go in. Right? So when you start to level into the consciousness, into the observer, then you can really start to continue that travel into the Atma itself. So give yourself some time. Give yourself some time to really become one with the observer. And to move and transcend beyond mind and beyond the ego. Okay? And this happens by sadhana. And it's possible to attain self-realization by only do your sadhana. So that means that you do mantras, you do meditation, you do spiritual practice every day. And you have to be very hard on yourself. You have to do it every single day. It's like you're brushing your teeth, right? You're eating food. You are sleeping. The spiritual practice should be there every single day if you want to attain this, if you want to liberate yourself, if you want to become free and to really understand why you incarnated. Why are you here? Who are you? Then spiritual practice is a must. Okay? Thank you so much for listening. Jai Gurudev.